Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing in the chapter The Aim of Life, 4 Theories of Existence. We are now on page 703, beginning with the line, "That equation can only be found."
So, to make a resume of what we have done until now, learned what we have learned until now, there are 4 theories of existence. The first is the supra-cosmic. The supra-cosmic means the transcendent, the divine in himself. Only the divine is real, nothing else is real. This is, in Buddhism you have that theory, in the Mayavada theory also you have the same idea, that the rest is all illusion or semi-reality. Then there is the materialistic theory which says that the physical world is the only reality and there is nothing else apart from matter. It is that which produces everything coming out of the inconscient. Both these are not acceptable to Sri Aurobindo. They are partial. He admits their partial reality, but he does not admit them as the whole truth. Then there is the spiritual theory. To understand these and make it very simple, remember that there are 3 levels. The 3-level concept is very important. You will see it coming throughout, life divine, in synthesis, everywhere. The first is the lower hemisphere of body-mind life, the material world. The second is the intermediary world of the subtle planes, where the spiritual reality is the dominant principle. But the spiritual planes of consciousness also don't give you power and bliss entirely, and you have no control over the physical world. So you have to go to the 3rd level, which gives you a control and a possibility of transformation of the lower. That is what Sri Aurobindo's theory in essence is. So he is discussing each one, and in the previous para, what he has said, I'll just read out the summary and then we'll proceed with this one. So, as the evolution proceeds, man grows in consciousness and mind, develops himself sufficiently to realize the subtler aspects and forces in the cosmos. He has an intuition of a reality beyond earth and heaven, terrestrial and supra-terrestrial, an extra-cosmic absolute that is the origin and supreme source of everything. This feeling usually arises in man by spiritual ardor, the soul's need for perfection. It is aided and enhanced by many factors. The animal has absolutely no idea of perfection. It lives life as it is given to it. But man has a soul which is awake or is awaking, and he has a sense of perfection. He sees imperfection in the physical world, and he naturally can think of its opposite, and he wants perfection. So what is it that helps the spiritual life? First, a disappointed disgust of vital life by failure. When you start failing, then you see failure is the only point. What is the use of this world? I can't get perfection here, I have to go elsewhere. The second is the utter vanity and purposelessness of earthly life. What is it finally? I am born and I live a life and then I die. What's the purpose? What has been achieved? Nothing. Third, the aimlessness of repeated births in a cycle or a circle without access, without success or any issue. The ordinary man, even if aware of these feelings, may not summon up enough courage and will and the spiritual drive due to attempt the seeming impossible ascent. He doesn't have the will to do it. But the exceptional man abandons all to follow his soul's aim and the only need of his soul's aim, perfection. In fact, the imperfection of life, instead of discouraging such a man, only serves to strengthen and harden his resolve to attain his ideal. History has witnessed such periods of spiritual intensity in mankind, where many pursue the ideal, but the remainder lead the ordinary normal life, even while believing in its unreality, as in India. But this belief in the illusion view of the world, even while living the material life, dampens and blunts the interest in the physical world and results in a great fall. This leads to the failure of a progressive mind, ending in misery, illiteracy, ignorance, and impoverishment in every sphere of life. This is what happened in India. It lost the progressive mind. And very interestingly, he says in the synthesis that the progressive mind had to be imported through the British conquest. So here he says it in a very subtle language, but the progressive mind which was there in the West, because they never rejected the physical world. So they were trying for perfection and they did succeed. So when the British came in, they brought in also that progressive mind. It has taken about 100 years to become also a fact in India, and now you can see that it is working in India also, the progressive mind. Okay. Thus, again, the divine equation of spirit and matter was missed in the Indian idea, as well as the entire will of God in creating the world with a clear purpose was badly misunderstood. The Indian idea of the 4 stages of life, the last one is the sannyasa, giving up the physical world. That's the weakest point. And that is what Sri Aurobindo is now trying to rectify. So this is what he said in the previous one. So even in the third theory of spiritual life, there was no equation between spirit and matter. That equation is what he is going to speak of now in our para. That equation, the equality, spirit is equal to matter, okay? So equation. That equation can be found or can only be found if we recognize the purport of our whole complex human nature in its right place in the cosmic movement. What is needed is to give it its full legitimate value to each part of our composite being and many-sided aspiration, and find out the key of their unity as well as their difference. The finding must be by synthesis or an integration, and since development is clearly the law of the human soul, it is most likely to be discovered by an evolutionary synthesis. A synthesis of this kind was attempted in the ancient Indian culture, which he means by the 4 ideas of artha, kama, dharma, moksha. He doesn't mention that, but that's what he means. Okay, so it accepted 4 legitimate motives of human living: man's vital interests and needs, his desires, his ethical and religious aspiration, his ultimate spiritual aim and destiny. Now look at each one. Accepted 4 legitimate motives of human living. Man's vital interests and needs, his desires. So the this stage of the grihastha, okay, the family life. His ethical and religious aspiration. That's the third one. The brahmacharya, the grihastha, then the vanaprastha, the ethical and religious aspiration is the preparing yourself for a spiritual life. His ultimate spiritual aim and destiny is that sannyasa. That was the weak point. In other words, the claims of his vital, physical and emotional being, the claims of his ethical and religious being, governed by a knowledge of the law of God and nature and man. Now again you will see the stress on God, nature and man. He uses other words in other places. God is the transcendent, nature is the cosmic, and man is the individual. And the claims of his spiritual longing for the beyond. Beyond what? Beyond the cosmos, the transcendent, for which he seeks satisfaction by an ultimate release from an ignorant, mundane existence. It provided for a period of, what is the it? The Indian idea. Okay? The Indian idea. It provided for a period of education and preparation. The brahmacharya, student, a period of education and preparation based on this idea of life. A period of normal living to satisfy human desires and interests, the grihastha, the family life. You earn and you satisfy the needs of a vital. Under the moderating rule of the ethical and religious part in us, the preparation for the moral and religious life, which is, they say vanaprastha. Vanaprastha, you are getting ready to go into the forest, giving up the world. A period of withdrawal and spiritual preparation is the last one. And a last period of renunciation of life and release into the spirit. That's the sannyasa. Evidently, if applied as a universal rule, this prescribed norm, this delineation of the curve of our journey, would miss the fact that it is impossible for all to trace out the whole circle of development in a single short lifetime. But it was modified by the theory of a complete evolution pursued through a long succession of rebirths before one could be fit for a spiritual liberation. Then the idea of reincarnation comes in. Okay? You have to have many, many births. You can't have this perfection in one life. This synthesis, with its spiritual insight, largeness of view, symmetry, completeness, did much to raise the tone of human life. But eventually it collapsed. Its place was occupied by an exaggeration of the impulse of renunciation, which destroyed the symmetry of the system and cut it into two movements of life in opposition to each other. Spiritual life, mundane life. The last one, the sannyasa, is the problem. The normal life of interests and desires with an ethical and religious coloring, and the abnormal or supernormal inner life founded on renunciation. Renunciation of what? Renunciation of the physical world. The old synthesis, in fact, contained in itself the seed of this exaggeration and could not but lapse into it. For if we regard the escape from life as our desirable end, moksha, if we omit to hold up any high offer of life fulfillment, if life fulfillment, body, mind, life, there should be a fulfillment. If life has not a divine significance in it, the impatience of the human intellect and will must end by driving at a shortcut and getting rid as much as possible of any tedious and dilatory processes. If it cannot do that, or if it is incapable of following the shortcut, it is left with the ego and its satisfactions, but with nothing greater to be achieved here. Life is split into the spiritual and the mundane, and there can only be an abrupt transition, not a harmony or reconciliation of these parts of our nature. So, very clear, even in the Indian idea, ultimately you have to go, leave the world and go there. This was a weak point which Sri Aurobindo is now trying to correct. Because this theory, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyasa, ultimately you have to give up the physical world. Then why was it created at all? That was the whole question.
So, those of us who are here now must have had many, many births to get here.
It's 100% sure, not must have. They have had.
Have had. And are we there closer to the realization because of these rebirths?
Yes, that depends on the individual largely, because each individual develops at his own pace. There is no uniformity. Even if you have a marathon race with 1,000 people running the 24 miles or 40 miles or whatever it is, they will all end up not together, but they'll be one by one, each one will come at a different time. It's the same in spiritual life. Each one depends on the intensity of the soul aspiration, and that varies from individual to individual. Okay, so now Srila is saying that there was no equation of spirit and matter, even in the Indian idea. The reincarnation theory was there in seed form, in the Dashavatar, but it was not spelt out. The idea of evolution came in Europe in the 18th or 19th century, but it was limited only to the physical forms. It's only a biological evolution. Even that is denied by many, even in Europe. It's a biological evolution. Srivada's theory of evolution is that of consciousness with the support of a biological evolution. The biological evolution is necessary because the organism which is evolving has to be sufficiently developed to incorporate the higher consciousness. So, for instance, an insect cannot have the same capacity as a cat, obviously. A cat cannot have the same capacity as a human being. It doesn't have a mind. But mind also is not enough to have so you need a yogi who has developed his being in such a way that he is capable of housing the higher consciousness. So that's why it has to be, the biological system also has to be there as a support. Okay, both are there. But Srivada's theory of evolution is definitely based on the progress of consciousness, not of the biological form. We start the next sentence, para.
Yes.
A spiritual evolution. He has spoken of the spiritual evolution in many lives, so he is taking that up. A spiritual evolution, an unfolding here of the being within, from birth to birth, of which man becomes the central instrument, and human life at its highest offers the critical turning point, is the link needed for the reconciliation of life and spirit. So, that equation that he spoke about, spirit and matter, that equation can come about only after the advent of man, because yoga can become conscious. The animal can do no conscious yoga. There may be some sort of evolutionary urge even in the animal, but it's not conscious. Even in the majority of men, the evolution is there, but it's inward and it's not conscious. You are progressing, I am progressing even when I am not doing yoga. That's the interesting part. So,
but the world has expanded so greatly. Billions of people here now.
yes,
Is there a reason for that?
yes.
What is the reason for this great expansion into billions in
You
one
mean a
country?
population?
Yes.
But that is balanced by nature. When the population goes beyond a certain level and nature can't sustain, the food supply is not enough, then there is a correction by nature through floods and earthquakes and storms.
But now it seems that it can sustain much more.
Yeah, but now man is also thinking of going to other planets
Okay.
and bodies. So that is an interesting question.
And I don't know about that.
No, the point is that, no, it is bound to happen one day. It's not that impossible. Man has already gone and put his foot.
Agreed. But I think that the sustainability of the earth is much more than we think.
Of course. And we have not still explored the food possibilities in the sea. We have not explored so many other possibilities.
And
the nature of food itself may change.
And the deserts.
Huh?
The deserts are now becoming.
Yes. And not only that, we can make the deserts bloom, yes, and food can be increased. But also note that food itself can become more and more subtle. We may not need even physical food. Already the yogis don't depend so much on physical food. Their food intake becomes much less. So that's an interesting question, and that's another question altogether, whether the earth will be able to sustain and to what extent will it sustain the population. That's an interesting question, but we have to leave that for other areas. So it is man who has the possibility of creating that equation between spirit and matter. That's what he's saying. Okay? And critical turning point is the link needed for the reconciliation of life and spirit. For it allows us to take into account the total nature of man and to recognize the legitimate place of his triple attraction to earth, to heaven, and to the supreme reality. Now note again how again Srimad is talking of the three levels. So this concept of the three levels is clear. Many things will become clear to you. Attraction, triple attraction to earth, level 1. Okay? You are at the physical level, matter, life and mind. To heaven, the subtle planes of consciousness, the second level, where you can get spiritual liberation. The third level is the supreme reality. And in the supreme reality only you will get the power to effectuate that equation between spirit and matter. At the second level, the capacity to equate spirit and matter is not there. You have a consciousness which is free, but you don't have the power and also sometimes not the bliss. And even if you have the power and bliss to a certain extent, you don't have it enough to make it effective in the physical world. There is a dichotomy. So the second level and the first level, the Indian idea has come to that, but they have not yet come fully to the other level. Even in the Upanishads and other areas, the three levels are mentioned, but that the third level is absolutely essential for evolution. That idea, Srimad is going to develop fully.
And what can the overmental do?
The overmind also does not have the power to change the physical world. And it has run through man. So, to earth, to heaven, and to the supreme reality, the three levels. Okay? Level 1, level 2, level 3. But the supreme reality is the supermind. Okay? You can take it literally, or the Purushottama, or you can call it what you want. There are subtle differences are there, but I am just giving you a total, a broad picture. But a complete solution of its oppositions can be arrived at only on this basis, that the lower consciousness of mind, life, body, level 1, cannot arrive at its full meaning until it is taken up, restated, transformed by the light and power and joy of the higher spiritual consciousness. While the higher too does not stand in its full right relation to the lower by mere rejection, but by this assumption and domination, this taking up of its unfulfilled values, this restatement and transformation, a spiritualizing and supramentalizing of the mental, vital and physical nature. Note, the spiritualizing is the second level. The supramentalizing is the third level. Okay? Then only the equation between spirit and matter can come. The terrestrial ideal, which has been so powerful in the modern mind, which is the terrestrial ideal? Perfection in the physical world, of physical life, physical and vital and mental life. Terrestrial ideal, which has been so powerful in the modern mind, restored man and his life on earth and the collective hope of the race to a prominent position and created an insistent demand for a solution. This is the good it has accomplished. Okay. So materialism has done a lot of good. It has cleared up all the cobwebs and the wrong ideas, and it has asked you to base yourself solidly on experience and verified fact, and not airy-fairy ideas. That's what Srimad says in Life Divine elsewhere. But by overdoing and exclusiveness, it unduly limited man's scope, it ignored that which is the highest, and in the end, the largest thing in him, and by this limitation it missed the full pursuit of its own object. The own object of man, the physical man, is perfection. But he is absolutely ignorant of the higher reality, and as Swami is saying, the largest thing in him is a psychic being. So that he is completely ignorant of. So he has missed the equation. He cannot have perfection in the physical world unless he takes into account the reality of the supreme truth and the psychic being. If mind were the highest thing in man and nature, then indeed this frustration might not result. Still, the limitation of scope would be there, a narrow possibility, a circumscribed prospect. What Siddhartha is saying? He is saying that if mind was the final, okay, so it would be a perfection, but it would be a limited perfection, circumscribed. You cannot go beyond a certain point in the mental world. Still, the limitation of scope would be there, a narrow possibility, a circumscribed prospect. But if mind is only a partial unfolding of consciousness, and there are powers beyond of which nature in our race is capable, then not only does our hope upon earth, let alone what is beyond it, depend upon their development, but this becomes the one proper road for our evolution. So, the material man must accept that there are subtler planes beyond the cosmos.
And he says, let alone what is beyond it.
Yes. Forget about the highest, but even in the physical world, if you want perfection, you have to take into account the spiritual fact. Now note interestingly, Srimda uses words here for the level 2, the spiritual world, he uses the word supra-terrestrial. That means beyond the level 1. Terrestrial is the physical earth. Then the third level he uses the word supra-cosmic, beyond the cosmos. That's the third level. So don't get confused between supra-terrestrial and supra-cosmic. They are not the same thing. Supra-cosmic refers to the third, supra-terrestrial refers to the second. Okay, so I read the summary of what he has said here. On what then depends the possibility of divine life upon earth? Now, I told you that it's very interesting to ask yourself, what is Srimda saying here? So you ask a question, okay, and then you find that he is giving the answer to that. So the para that we have just now read, he is going to discuss this. On what then depends the possibility of divine life upon earth? We must recognize the following points. So that is what he has discussed here. Okay. So, there is a spiritual evolution of the soul developing from birth to birth. This is the first thing that we have to take into account. The second, man is the main instrument of this conscious evolution in nature, not the animal. It's only when man comes in that the evolution can go faster. Before that, it was mechanical and unconscious. Now with man there, the evolution can become conscious. Third point that we have to realize, that the body, life and mind are imperfect tools and cannot fulfill themselves unless there is a descent from above of consciousness, of light, of force and ananda to transform them into a divine nature. Transform what? Transform body, mind, life into divine nature. There has to be a descent from above. In other words, the descent can come only when the lower nature is capable of housing that. Otherwise, it's like pouring a liquid, heavy liquid, into an unbaked jar. The jar will break. So there has to be a preparation for the spiritual life. You have to prepare yourself for it. In modern times, materialism has been so dominating that mankind has neglected the higher reality and overstressed the reality of the lower. Of course, materialism has cleared the cobwebs of confused thinking and superstitions, and its positive contribution has to be appreciated. But its belief in its sole reality has distorted the right view. Mind is not the last rung of the evolutionary ladder. There are higher planes which have to be attained. This is what Sandra said. You have to recognize that there are spiritual planes of consciousness.
We can do one more para.
Yeah, sure. Maybe even two, I don't know. We'll see. Mind and life themselves cannot grow into their fullness except by the opening up of the larger and greater consciousness to which mind only approaches. Now, let's look at what he's saying here. Mind and life, he has said that even the material man is trying for perfection here. So, can we reach perfection of body, mind, and life? Man is trying. Perfection of body through understanding of the nature of body and giving medicines, curing it through medicines. So he is trying for perfection. Okay? And he is trying also for the vital perfection through art, literature, and all this, and mind also. So, is it possible that they can themselves come? So they are saying, no, not possible. Except by the opening of the larger and greater consciousness to which mind only approaches. It's a mind of man that can go into the higher planes of consciousness, not the body and the vital. Their capacity is not to go into the subtle. Only the mind can go into the subtle. That's very clear. Such a larger and greater consciousness is the spiritual. For the spiritual consciousness is not only higher than the rest, but more embracing. Universal as well as transcendental, it can take up mind and life into its light and give them the true and utmost realization of all for which they are seeking. Okay, so universal is level 2, transcendent is level 3. It can take up mind and life into its light and give them the true and utmost realization of all for which they are seeking. For it has a greater instrumentality of knowledge, a fountain of deeper power and will, an unlimited reach and intensity of love and joy and beauty. So, now note interestingly how these correspond. So, the greater instrumentality of knowledge, mind. Mind can attain knowledge, but these spiritual planes of consciousness have spiritual knowledge which is greater. Okay, so that's for the mind. Then a fountain of deeper power and will for the vital. Okay, the power that the vital has and will it has is not sufficient unless the spiritual power and will come in and descend into him. An unlimited reach and intensity of love and joy and beauty. This is the higher vital. Love and joy and beauty don't belong to the lower vital, but the higher vital. But can that also, higher vital, can it reach perfection of love and joy and beauty? No. It has to come from above. Okay, that's what he's saying. These are the things for which our mind, life, and body are seeking: knowledge, power, and joy. And to reject that by which all these arrive at their utmost plenitude is to shut them out from their own highest consummation. So the ascetic is giving up the physical world and going there, and he is giving up the possibilities of body, mind, life, perfection. That's what sense. So it's impossible to have an equation. So, an opposite exaggeration demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence nullifies the creative action of the spirit and excludes from us all that the divine manifests in its being. Now, we'll look at this sentence carefully. An opposite exaggeration. So what is the first exaggeration? The physical world is the only reality. The opposite exaggeration, the spiritual world is the only reality. That's the opposite exaggeration. Demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence. Now, what is this? Very clearly,
Colorless.
Brahman consciousness. Yeah. Because when you go there, there's a oneness, there is no variety, there is nothing that can affect you. You are absolutely in a still condition. All the disturbances of the physical world don't reach you. It's a colorless and very interesting purity. There is purity because there is only oneness of spiritual existence. But that's a negative state. Why should you not have something which is full of power? And so in the spiritual plane, second level, you don't have that power. You have liberation, you have purity, you have oneness, you have freedom, but no power and no bliss. Touches of power and bliss can come, but definitely not enough to transform the lower. Your body-mind life will remain as imperfect as ever. I refer you back to that famous poem, Shirda's poem, The Self. Okay. So the man who is free says, I am free, and then starts cursing when his dinner is not ready. Okay, that's what Shirda is mentioned talking here. So, an opposite exaggeration, the spiritual exaggeration, demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence, nullifies the creative action of the spirit. The creative action of the spirit has created body-mind life. It has created matter. So it is nullifying it. When you say only the spiritual is real, that's what it means. Nullifies the creative action of the spirit. Spirit has created body-mind life, matter, life, mind is created. You are saying no, you are nullifying it. So, nullifies the creative action of spirit and excludes from us all that the divine manifests in its being. The divine is creating the world, how can you say it is meaningless? So the spiritual ideal is not enough, that's what he's saying. It leaves room only for an evolution without sense of or fulfillment. So there is an evolution, no doubt. You can get liberation also. But the sense of fulfillment is not there. You are only escaping from the world. But why not try and fulfill and bring the perfection down in the physical world itself? But can you do that from level 2? You can't. You have to go to level 3. That's what is coming to. Okay? Without sense of fulfillment, for a cutting off of all that has been evolved is the sole culmination. You are cutting out everything. You are giving up the physical world. It turns the process of our being into a meaningless curve of a plunge into ignorance and return out of it, or erects a wheel of cosmic becoming with only an escape issue. So you are coming here to run away from it again. That's what Swami is saying. So what is the point? Okay, so the intermediary, the supra-terrestrial aspiration, the intermediary, level 2, the spiritual planes, the supra-terrestrial, not the supra-cosmic, the supra-terrestrial, the one that is above the physical world. The intermediary, the supra-terrestrial aspiration, cuts short the fulfillment of the being above by not proceeding to its highest realization of oneness and diminishes it below by not allowing a proper amplitude of sense to its presence in the material universe and its acceptance of life in an earthly body. So for that you have to go to the third level. The second level of a spiritual life. Until now it was thought wonderful if you have a spiritual life. Same they're saying, wait. It's not that wonderful at all. You have to go even more wonderful is possible. That's what he's saying. Okay? A large relation of unity and integration restores the balance. Balance of what? Spirit and matter. Illumines the whole truth of being and links together the steps of nature. Okay, so again we'll see what he is saying in this para. I am reading the summary. Now again we put a question, okay? What is meant by the fulfillment of life and mind and even body, okay? We have in the lower hemisphere our body, our life and our mind. They are limited and imperfect instruments, but their fulfillment would mean the body becomes perfectly healthy. I have added this to make it clear. Sharma has spoken about it in a diluted manner elsewhere, but I have condensed it. What is the fulfillment of body? Body must become perfectly healthy, free of disease, old age and death. It creates itself. The body has to create itself and dissolve itself by its own will as required, without being subject to any other law imposed by nature.
So
that is the fulfillment of body.
The body dissolves itself by its own will.
Yes. It creates itself, Swayambhu, and dissolves itself. That will be the nature of the supramental body. Okay. Then the vital. What is the vital's fulfillment? The vital that seeks expansion, possession, power, enjoyment, mastery gets all of this in full measure. But it has to become pure. So when the higher Chit Shakti comes down, it can purify the vital and you can get real enjoyment and possession and power. That is the fulfillment of the vital. But the spiritual life is denying it, is escaping from it. What about the mind's fulfillment? Mind is seeking knowledge, and omniscience will satisfy it fully. So, all this can be done, the fulfillment of mind, life, body, only when the higher comes down into the lower. Okay, so. But our life and mind are limited and cannot achieve what they seek unless the higher hemisphere of light, power, consciousness, and bliss descends into body, life, and mind and transforms them into the divine instruments that they really are meant to become finally. So, what is interesting is the spiritual life of ascent to level 2 is an ascent. But that's not enough. Same though is wanting a descent of the higher into the body-mind life. The ascent is an escaping from the lower, and the descent is a coming of the higher into the lower. Okay. So, but sometimes only an ascent of the lower leads to peace, infinite freedom, liberation. But this is often considered a sufficient spiritual recompense for the yogic effort. But this is a halfway house. It's a relatively colorless peace and calm without power and bliss. Besides, it leaves the lower nature so imperfect as it was before liberation. So, the ascent has to proceed even further beyond the mutable earth and the immutable spiritual heights. Mutable earth, level 1, the immutable spiritual heights, level 2, into the highest summits of fulfillment, consciousness, force, and bliss, level 3. This is the fulfillment intended by the integral path, and this has to be achieved here on earth itself, not an escape into the second level. This is the supramental consummation. So, in this integration, the cosmic reality stands as the supreme truth of being. To realize it is the highest reach of our consciousness. But it is this highest reality which is also the cosmic being, the cosmic consciousness, the cosmic will and life. It has to put these things forth, not outside itself, but in its own being, not as an opposite principle, but as its own self-unfolding and self-expression. So, the cosmic being is not a meaningless freak or fantasy or a chance error. Okay. The physical world is not a chance error as science thinks. That is, by chance it has come into existence. It is not that at all. There is a purpose to it. There is a divine significance and truth in it. Truth in what? The creation, the physical world, cosmos. The manifold self-expression of the spirit is its high sense. The divine itself is the key of its enigma. If you look very carefully at the physical world with only your mind, you will find that it's an enigma. What is the purpose? Why there is so much of imperfection? From where has it come? What is the end? It's an enigma. But the divine, so to get the solution to the enigma, you have to go to the divine. Only he can tell you. Okay. A perfect self-expression of the spirit is the object of our terrestrial existence. This cannot be achieved if we have not grown conscious of the supreme reality. For it's only by the touch of the absolute that we can arrive at our own absolute. Not the second level, but the third level, the absolute. Supreme reality, when Swamdev is saying, it means the third level. For it is only by the touch of the absolute that we can arrive at our own absolute. But neither can it be done to the exclusion of the cosmic reality. You have to take into account the cosmic reality also. We must become universal, for without an opening into universality, the individual remains incomplete. The individual, separating himself from the all to reach the highest, loses himself in the supreme heights, including in himself the cosmic consciousness. He recovers his wholeness of self and still keeps his supreme gain of transcendence. So he has to have both. He has to have his individuality, he has to have his, in the second level, the cosmic consciousness, as well as the supreme third level. He recovers the wholeness of self and still keeps his supreme gain of transcendence. He fulfills it and himself in the cosmic completeness. A realized unity of the transcendent, the universal and the individual, is an indispensable condition for the fullness of the self-expressing spirit. So I can see realized unity. Unity of what? The transcendent, the universal and the individual. The transcendent level 3, universal level 2, individual level 1. So all have to be completely realized together. Not one by one, not sequentially, but simultaneously. Then only the perfection can come. Okay? So, for the universe is the field of its totality of self-expression, while it is through the individual that its evolutionary self-unfolding here comes to its acme. But this supposes not only a real being of the individual, which the Buddhist denies, okay, but the revelation of our secret eternal oneness with the Supreme and with all cosmic existence. In his self-integration, the soul of the individual must wake to universality and to transcendence. So, I read this summary. So, universality, level 2, spiritual awakening, transcendence, level 3. So, the supreme absolute, the supra-cosmic, is the ultimate reality. It is beyond the mutable and the immutable. The mutable is the physical world and the immutable is the level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness. It is the supramental gnosis, level 3, that creates the cosmos and the individual, but within itself. Therefore, it is at once transcendental, cosmic, individual, simultaneously. On earth, it's possible to have experience of all the three separately, but that's not enough. It has to be simultaneous. That's the interesting part. Okay. On earth, it is the individual who is the pivotal point at which the evolution becomes conscious. So the individual has to first universalize himself by losing ego, then he must become the transcendent. So first you have to go to level 2, spiritualize yourself. You know power over the lower. You go to the third level, now you have spiritualized yourself, but you also have the power to change the lower. That's what I'm saying. This is what the individual soul has to achieve. Become transcendent and cosmic, even while retaining his real individuality by losing the false individuality of the ego. So this is what has to do. So Sri has given you the fourth theory of existence, the equation of spirit and matter, and that can be done only by man. And he has to go to the third level to achieve this perfection. Now, the supra-terrestrial existence. So I am pointing out again to you the word supra-terrestrial. The supra-terrestrial is above the terrestrial world, means level 2, not level 3. Okay? The level 3 would be the supra-cosmic, above the cosmos. Okay. The supra-terrestrial existence is also a truth of being. For, now he is saying that also is a truth of being, okay, the spiritual world. For the material is not the only plane of our existence. Other planes of consciousness there are to which we can attain and which have already their hidden links within us. Which are these links? Body, mind, life. And also, the link he has given very often also, it is a symmetrical link. Sat becomes the body. Chit Shakti becomes the vital. Supermind becomes the mind, and Ananda becomes the psychic being. These are the links between the higher and the lower. Okay, so that's what he's saying. They already have their hidden links within us. Not to reach up to whatever greater region, not to reach up to whatever greater regions of the soul are open to us. Not to have the experience of them, not to know and manifest their law in ourselves, is to fall short of the height and fullness of our being. But worlds of a higher consciousness are not the only possible scene and habitation of the perfected soul. Nor can we find in any unchanging typal world the final or total sense of the Spirit's self-expression in the cosmos. Now he has brought in a new word, unchanging typal world. We'll discuss that later on. The material world, this earth, this human life, are a part of the Spirit's self-expression and have their divine possibility. That possibility is evolutionary, and it contains the possibilities of all the other worlds in it. Okay. Unrealized but realizable. Earth life is not a lapse into the mire of something undivine, vain and miserable, offered by some power to itself as a spectacle, or to the embodied soul as a thing to be suffered and then cast away from it. It is the scene of the evolutionary unfolding of the being, which moves towards the revelation of a supreme spiritual light and power and joy and oneness, but includes in it also the manifold diversity of the self-achieving spirit. There is an all-seeing purpose in the terrestrial creation. A divine plan is working itself out through its contradictions and perplexities, which are a sign of the many-sided achievement towards which are being led the soul's growth and the endeavor of nature. So, what simply saying is that there is a meaning in the creation of the physical world, and everything is meaningful. We have to combine all. I am reading the summary. We have now seen that the terrestrial cosmic creation is real, though an outermost vestment of the Lord. It's the lowest world. We have also established that the absolute, the supramental, is the reality that creates the cosmos. But what about all the other supra-terrestrial worlds between these two poles? Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind. They too are real, and if man remains ignorant of them, he will not have fullness of being. But these worlds are typal worlds, static without evolution. So now, the idea must be very clear. The physical world exists, but these subtle worlds do exist by themselves. And these subtle worlds, there is no evolution. They are static. So they are typal beings which live there. For instance, in the vital world, elves and gnomes and all these beings are there. In the mental world also, there are Gandharvas, Kinnaras, angels. All these beings are there in the mental world. But they are typal beings, of a fixed type. They don't evolve. So if they want to evolve, they have to come down to the physical world. Why? Because there is silence and no movement there. And there is movement in time and space here. So for evolution, you have to come down here. Even the gods have to come down here if they want to evolve. Okay? So, the cosmic terrestrial has been created with a purpose. And it's not something to be experienced once and then discarded away after one brief life, as though it had no more meaning or value. The earth is the scene of a divine drama being enacted evolutionarily. It will reveal the supreme divine light with all its possibilities which are yet to come. This is what Shanti is saying in this para.
Thank you, Ranga.
So now we have a clear idea of what the fourth theory of existence is. A divinization of matter.
Namaste. And we will see you again on Saturday to continue our series.